Imagine it's Sunday night. You open your calendar, you look at the week ahead, you start moving things around. A meeting gets rescheduled, a project deadline gets pushed. You had a couple of tasks from your task manager that need to get done, and 20 minutes later, you close the laptop and tell yourself, planned your week. But I'd argue that you haven't. You've merely triaged it. And by Wednesday, it's gonna start to feel like a complete waste of time because the whole thing will be blown up anyway. But planning doesn't always have to end in disaster. There is a simple and effective way to protect time for what's really important and get everything done. The key lies in understanding the difference between time blocking and time boxing. And in this video, I'm gonna walk you through a practice that's had a bigger impact on my productivity than just about anything else I've tried. And I'll show you the free tool that I built to make it ridiculously easy to start. Now, before we get there though, we need to discuss what's actually happening when you try to plan your entire week in one go. Because what most of us call planning isn't actually planning, it's task triage. You see, most of the time the shape of your week was actually determined before you ever started planning because there was a bunch of stuff that was already there. You didn't start with a blank slate. You were told what to do by what was already on your calendar, what recently landed in your inbox, and what your task manager told you that you needed to pay attention to. You didn't decide what your week was going to look like. You didn't shape your days around your intentions. You just tried to cram as much as you possibly could into the limited space that you had available. And I get it because I have been there. As long as there's a space, the human tendency is to fill it with whatever seems most urgent right now. And that, my friend, is why the things that you say matter most tend to get crowded out. Nobody triages their way into regular deep work. Nobody finds the time for a regular date night. The urgent defaults always scream the loudest, and the things that actually move the needle on your career, your relationships, and your health tend to speak softly and get drowned out by the noise. It's a game of volume, and the things that are truly important usually lose, which is exactly why you need to design your ideal week, not plan it. If planning your week is task triage, designing a week is a completely different approach. So instead of starting with a list of obligations, when you design your week, you start with a blank slate, and you decide what the shape of the week should look like, what categories of effort and rest and connection you want it to hold, before you let any specific task or meeting in. You protect the space for the things that are important before anything officially gets added. And once the shape of your ideal week template is set, the actual stuff of life gets to live inside it, not the other way around. Now, this may sound like a small perspective shift, but it isn't. It's critical if you really want to do more of what really matters. Former General and US President Dwight Eisenhower once said that plans are worthless, but planning is everything. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I think he's absolutely right for a very specific reason. No matter how carefully you craft the plan on Sunday night, as a plan, it is basically worthless by Wednesday. The call got moved, the Q3 deck took twice as long, responding to email ate the entire morning. In reality, the weekly plan never survives contact with the actual week. But the act of planning, which is the act of deciding what shape your week should hold before you let anything in, that can provide immense value. Not in the specific schedule, but in the decision about what your time is actually for. So by deciding ahead of time what the best use of your limited hours is, your brain is free to focus on the task at hand instead of trying to figure out where the next urgent request is going to come from. If you have a template to base that off of, even better, because once you have that, it becomes a lot easier to time block your day in a way that survives contact with the outside world. That distinction is what this whole video is about. Now, to be clear, I did not invent any of this. This is a practice with some real roots. I just borrowed what others did before me and I made it my own. Cal Newport is my major inspiration here. He is one of my favorite authors, and he calls his version of this a weekly template, which is a set of guidelines set at the start of a quarter that you reference every time you sit down to plan a specific week. So I picked this up from him years ago and I've been quietly running some version of it ever since. Through career changes, kids growing up, seasons of intense work, and lots of travel, This practice has stuck and it's given me the structure that I need to make sure I can follow through on my intentions and make progress in the areas that really matter. So every quarter, I update my ideal week template to reflect what I generally want a week to look like in this season of my life. Now, the specific blocks I have on my ideal week template shift every single quarter, but the practice itself has stood the test of time. That's what actually convinced me it was worth building a tool around, because most planning advice does not survive a real life with real chaos in it. This one does. But before we get to how I do it, we need to talk about the part that most people get wrong. The mistake almost everyone makes when they try planning their week is they get too granular. They sit down with a blank week, their list of obligations, and they start filling in the boxes. 8 a.m., check email. 9 a.m., work on the Q3 deck. 10 a.m., review marketing draft. 1 p.m., call with Sarah. They basically time block their entire week, but because it's based on specific tasks and it's incredibly rigid, it doesn't take long before it gets completely blown up. The more detailed the plan, the more wrong it becomes by Wednesday, because none of it has happened the way that they thought it would. The call got moved, the Q3 deck took twice as long, email ate the entire morning. The whole plan begins to feel like a lie, and by Friday, they've completely abandoned it. Now, the fix is not more discipline. It's to create an ideal week template first that helps you naturally protect the time for the things that matter right now. Now, the process itself is pretty simple. Figure out what's important to you, block time for it on your weekly calendar template, and then try to stick to that template when you're time blocking your day. Now, notice what's missing here: a detailed weekly plan. That's right, chuck the detailed weekly plan. You can have some general idea of the big things that need to get done throughout your week, but trying to time block your entire week is a fool's errand. That juice just is not worth the squeeze. Just create your ideal week template and then time block your individual days and try to stick to the template as best you can. But when you're creating your weekly template, you need to approach things a little bit differently. And this is the thing that took me a little bit to figure out. Unlike when you time block your day, you do not give every hour a job. Instead, you give every hour a mode. So deep work, exercise, family time, date night, soccer practice, one-on-ones, reading, that's the stuff that goes on your ideal week template. The specific tasks can change from week to week, but the modes stay the same. That's what you're protecting. Now, this may sound like a small distinction, but it isn't, because a weekly plan made of random tasks shatters the first time the week goes sideways, because there's no big picture to compare it against, and weekly plans always go sideways. But with a template, you have a starting point every single morning when you plan your day. If you didn't stick to the plan last time, that's okay, you've got another chance. And building off of that template makes it easier to follow through on the things that are truly important to you. Now let's talk briefly about the difference between time boxing and time blocking. There's a distinction that's worth making here, even though most people use the terms interchangeably. Time blocking means you assign a specific task to a specific time. For example, 9 a.m., work on that Q3 slide deck. But time boxing is a little bit more flexible, and this we can use to help us protect time for our ideal week template, because it means that you've assigned a fixed duration to a type of work. So for example, 90 minutes of deep work starting at 9 a.m. Used this way, the task can change, but the box stays. You've got the container and you can fill it with whatever you want. So designing your ideal week is essentially time boxing at the weekly level. You're not deciding what task goes in the 9 a.m. slot. You're deciding what mode you want to be in at that time. The specific task you actually work on during that deep work block, that gets decided when you're planning that day. If you want more detail about how the daily, weekly, and quarterly plans connect, then check out this video that I did a while back on the topic of multi-scale planning, which is another Cal Newport term. But for now, just recognize that the daily plan is based off the time-boxed ideal week template, and that time-boxed plan was determined 3 months ago when you were deciding what you wanted to focus on for this quarter. And this is why a mode-based template can survive even the most chaotic schedule. The specific task was always going to change, but the mode, the kind of work you're doing, the kind of life you're living in that hour, was decided with intention, not with whatever happened to be screaming the loudest at you on Sunday night. And that intention that you set previously allows your brain to focus on what it's actually doing instead of freaking out about all the other things that it should be doing instead. Think about creating the ideal week template like an architect building a house. You don't build a house by deciding where each individual item goes. You start with the basic floor plan. Here's where the kitchen goes, here's the bedrooms, here's the living room, and then you decide what goes into those rooms. The furniture can change, you might rearrange it, swap things out seasonally, but the floor plan stays the same. Your ideal week template is the floor plan for your next quarter. The modes are the rooms. Deep work has a room, family time has a room, exercise has a room, reading has a room. The specific tasks, the furniture can change week to week, but the rooms stay where they are. And just like a house, the floor plan was set before you started moving furniture around, not after. Seems simple? It is, but the 20 minutes of work creating that ideal week template sets the architecture for the next 12 weeks of my life. And as I said before, this is quietly one of the most important planning rituals that I have. Which leads us to the question, what is the ideal week template really? It's not a schedule, it's not a plan, it really is just a template for what you want your week to look like. It's a starting point for planning your day and is more a picture of what your life looks like when you're at your best than anything else. So when you fill in those blocks, here's where deep work lives, here's where I'm fully present with my kids, here's where I read, here's when I move my body, you're creating the space for the version of yourself that you are trying to become. The template is not a cage you're trying to fit a real week into, it's a model of what a good week looks like for you in this season of your life. Now, some weeks you'll get most of it. Some weeks you'll get hardly any of it, but the accuracy is not the point. The point is having something to aim at, a tangible image of what a good week looks like in this specific season of your life. Now, if you want to dive deeper into the bigger picture planning that sets all this up, I do have another video on my personal retreat process here where I walk through the whole thing. That's where I actually set this template every single quarter. And I've been doing that personal retreat process every quarter since 2017. So I've been doing some version of this ideal week template for years now. And what's changed across seasons is kind of fascinating to look back on because there were seasons when I had a lot of regular meetings and it was hard to protect that time for myself and my family. There were other times when I had a lot of flexibility, but it was hard to predict what each day was actually going to look like. Sometimes I had complete control over my schedules. Sometimes most of it was already accounted for, but getting all of it onto my ideal week template helped me to make sure that I kept making progress on what was really important to me. The specific blocks have shifted every single quarter, but the practice of having those blocks has remained. That has stuck because no matter what season I'm in, the fundamental problem is the same. If I don't decide what my hours are for, somebody else will decide for me. And that's actually the real value of this practice. It's not about perfectly executing a predetermined schedule. It's about making a decision once about what your precious time is best used for, and then letting that decision guide you through the chaos of a real week instead of letting the chaos decide for you. Most planning systems will ask you to make 100 small decisions every single week. What task goes where, which meeting to move, whether to squeeze in an email before lunch. This approach asks you to make one big decision once a quarter, and then you can use it over and over and over again to eliminate that pressure when planning your day. Now, as I mentioned, I revisit my ideal week every single quarter as part of my personal retreat, and I take a step back and I look at the bigger picture of my life and work. Honestly, once a quarter I think is the sweet spot for revisiting this and making changes as necessary. The reason I think the quarterly cadence is the right rhythm here is because life actually changes at that pace. A new season, a new school year, a new project, a kid who switched sports. The quarterly cadence catches all those shifts without inviting weekly tinkering. Now, to use my ideal week template, I simply reference that template file when I'm doing my planning. Remember, I'm not trying to recreate the specifics of the template exactly. That's never going to happen. I'm simply using it as a reference. I'm scanning the upcoming week and I'm asking, do I have space set aside for the things that I said matter? And when I time block my day, I'm trying to get as close to what I set on that ideal week template as I humanly can. All right, now let's talk about what happens when things go sideways, because they will go sideways. There will be gaps. Sometimes a mode just gets eaten. A meeting lands where deep work was supposed to live. A family obligation overrides my personal time. It happens, but the ideal week template actually makes it even easier to roll with those punches. So here's what happens in practice. Monday morning, you look at your ideal week, then you look at your actual calendar, and they don't match up. The first instinct is to throw out the template and say, well, that didn't work. Don't do that. The template isn't telling you to move the meeting. It's telling you that you need to fight harder to protect the space that's left. If your deep work session got eaten up on Tuesday, look for another place where it can live instead. If family time got compressed, find the next opportunity to expand it. The modes are what matter here, not the specific time slots. So when things get messed up, look for where and how your modes can live instead. Build some margin into your schedule, but don't change the template itself. That is the key. Remember, the template is your ideal. You're negotiating with reality, not rewriting the ideal. The template stays because next week, that deep work block on Tuesday will probably be where you want it. The meeting was a one-off. The mode is permanent, at least for the next 12 weeks. And the intention it provides when you're planning your day is what allows you to make consistent progress towards your goals over time. Okay, so I've talked long enough about the process. Let me give you an example and I'll share my own ideal week template to show you the kinds of things that I choose to put on here. First, I put my morning and evening routines on here for every day of the week. In this example, they're green. Next, I put all my family stuff on here in yellow, including the weekly one-on-one I do with my kids on Monday mornings, dinner together when possible, and weekly date night on Tuesdays. All of my exercise blocks are orange and I alternate between going to the gym and running 6 days a week. All of my creative work is purple, including writing blocks, video recordings, and podcasts. The red blocks are my strategy or thinking blocks, including a couple of mastermind groups I'm a part of. All my church responsibilities are in blue, including the small group that I lead on Thursdays and weekly worship team practice. And finally, the violet blocks are for reading and rest. I also theme my days, which you can see at the top of my ideal week template, where Monday is planning, Tuesday is creating, Wednesday is strategy, etc. I try to batch as many of my meetings as I can on Thursdays, keep Fridays open for thinking time, and recover on Saturdays. Having these themes helps me compartmentalize my work and allows me to shift between the different modes more easily. So that's my ideal week template, but remember, that's just one example. The important thing is that you're able to see the modes on your ideal week template for the things that are really important to you. Now, hopefully I've convinced you by this point to give creating your ideal week template a shot. You can actually do this many different ways. You can do it with any digital calendar app. You can do it with a notebook. You can do it with a spreadsheet. None of it is technically hard, but almost nobody does. The blank page is intimidating. The setup of a new system can feel like a project, which is a shame because like I said earlier, this really is one of the most effective productivity practices that I have ever come across. So I'm a nerd. I built a tool to make starting easier. It lives at idealweek.practicalpkm.com and you can use it right now for free. Let me show you what it looks like. So just click the button to get started and then drag across the grid to create a block. Click on the block to label it and choose a color up at the top to color code it. Then just build out your ideal week template and give every hour a mode. And if you want, you can click on each day column and give it a theme. The whole point is to get a clean visual of what you want your week to look like. Fast, no friction, no setup. If you want to change the time frames, you can click on the gear icon in the upper right and select the different start or end time and the calendar grid will update. When you're done, you can export it 5 different ways. You can select PDF for a clean version that you can easily save or send. Selecting PNG creates an image file that you can stick just about anywhere. The print option gives you a printable page that you can tape to the wall above your desk if you want. The markdown option gives you a .md file that you can link to in Obsidian. And the .ics option gives you a file so you can import the recurring blocks straight into your calendar app. Now again, this tool is completely free and your week is saved in your browser so you can come back and you can revise it later if you want. You can check it out right now by going to idealweek.practicalpkm.com. All right, so as we wrap up this video, I want to just reiterate that the ideal week template is just that. It's a template of your ideal week. Some weeks you'll get most of it, some weeks it'll be a real struggle, but the important thing is that you decide what your ideal week looks like for you for this season of your life. Remember, the week you design is the person you're becoming. The week you triage is the person that you're settling for. So the single sentence I want you to remember from this video is this: don't time block your week, design it instead. All right, so there you have it. As I mentioned, if you want to go deeper on the personal retreat process that sets all this up, I have that video linked in the description below, as well as the free tool that I built for you to do this yourself. If you want to access that tool and start building your ideal week template right now, you can do so by going to idealweek.practicalpkm.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.